You all know by now that in 1891, the parish of St. Stanislaus and the Archdiocese of St. Louis entered into a binding contract. It was a very simple deal. We build the church, we pay the priest, we pay the bills, and you in return give us a priest. So that contract lasted for 106-7 years, and it worked pretty good. But then one Sunday morning in August of 2004, some of you remember, you showed up in church and there was nobody there. In business legal terms, we could call it a breach of contract, because one of the parties did not follow through. One of the sides of the contract just didn't show up. In military language, you would call it going AWOL, right? All of a sudden, you don't show up at a place, a time that you are supposed to perform your service. In business terms, it's simple breach of contract. A contract is void usually when one of the parties does not fulfill his or her obligations. Similar breach of contract was spoken today at 2 readings for this Sunday. Both the first reading from Isaiah and the gospel text from Matthew speak of vineyards. And people hired to take care of those vineyards. The owners of both these vineyards enter into contract with the tenants. They make a legal deal, so to speak. There is a vineyard, I give you a job, you can even sleep over there, but in return, you give me what is mine when time for drinking comes around. And unfortunately, in both cases, in Isaiah and Matthew, the tenants behave like your last pastor. They don't do what they were hired to do. They don't perform their end of the deal. In Isaiah, the vineyard becomes a jungle. The tenants in Isaiah are simply lazy. They don't do what they are supposed to do. In Matthew, the tenants are not lazy, they are greedy. They want to take what is not theirs. But in both stories, there is a breach of contract. What they do have in common is that the tenants did not realize, or perhaps forgotten, or perhaps didn't want to remember, that they are not the owners. That the vineyard in which they are supposed to work is not theirs to do as they please. If you have a house, and if you are lazy, it's your problem. If it looks trashed, dirty, and nobody wants to visit you ever. If it's your house, you have every right to look like that. But if it's not your house, you are responsible to keep it nice and neat. And the same with Matthew. Because they were hired, they were supposed to produce fruit. This was their part of the deal. Jesus tells that story, just like Isaiah, to remind us that we are not the owners of what we have. That God gives us what we have as a lease. That God enters into a contract, so to speak, with us. And we are charged to be good stewards. We are not the owners of our planet. We are not the owners of our country. We are not the owners of our faith communities. We are called to be the stewards of those things. We are responsible for keeping them neat, clean. We are responsible for providing for next generations. And when we start thinking that it's ours, that's when we get in trouble. St. Francis, whose feast day we celebrated yesterday, was a big promoter of environmental issues. And today, in the 21st century, he reminds us that we need to be good stewards of this planet. That this is not ours to trash any way we want. That this world in which we live in is God's. And we are responsible for keeping it beautiful and healthy for generations to come. Sometimes we think that this country is ours, that our generation invented America, that nobody before us knew what it means to be American, that nobody after us will know what it means to be American. But this beautiful country of ours was leased to us for 80, 90, God willing, 100 years of your life. But we are charged to be good stewards of this country. This church, the Catholic faith that you and I cherish so much, is not our property. So many people think that I am in charge of my faith. I am in charge of the church. You are charged to be good stewards of your faith. You are charged to be the servant of your sisters and brothers within the body of Christ. The sacraments that we celebrate are not ours to decide who gets one and who doesn't. The faith that we celebrate and cherish is not ours to decide who will get it and who will not. It's up to God to give that wine from God's vineyard to whomever God wishes. This temptation to take things for granted, to assume that we are the owners of our planet, of our country, of our church, are the bottom of most of our problems today. We are called to be stewards of this world, of this country, of this church. And if we live with a strange conviction in our minds that we are the owners, our life will be filled with anxiety, with stress, with constant worrying. Am I a good owner? Is someone else going to steal it from me? In the second reading, St. Paul says, have no anxiety at all. And we are scratching our heads and thinking, what world are you living in? What do you mean have no anxiety? We have plenty of anxiety. But we do have that anxiety because we think it's ours. It's not. You and I have been charged to be good stewards. And if you put your trust in God, if you realize that this vineyard is God's, the anxiety slowly goes away. The vineyard is not mine. The vineyard is not yours. It's God's vineyard. And both Isaiah and Matthew go out of their way to describe how God is taking care of the vineyard. He builds the watchtower. He provides water. He makes sure that the vineyard has every opportunity to succeed. God will take care of God's vineyard. And our job is to be good stewards of our planet, of our country, and of our church.